Welcome to Health Tech Happy Hour Code Pour. I'm your host, Sean Mansa, and we are back for another episode. I'm really excited about this topic, and I have a new guest today that I'm excited to introduce you. Today's topic is really going to be focused around software quality engineering. To me, software quality engineering is the unsung hero of medical device development. They're the backbone of success and critical to mission success in getting your product to market in a safe and effective way. And Jesse has been an expert in the space for over a decade. He's worked with Medicurity for almost this whole amount of time here, has a ton of insights to share, and excited to get into this. So whether you are navigating any kind of complexities around regulatory compliance, risk management, software verification, validation, you name it, Jesse's been through it all. He's worked cross-functionally with a lot of different teams at a client site and internally. So excited to have him bring to the table his point of view. And without any further ado, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, Jesse.
Thank you very much, Sean. Excited to be here today. I'm excited to talk about these topics. I love software quality. I've been in medical software for over 15 years now. Started off doing EMR implementations in hospitals and worked at a number of different medical device companies. What I love about Medicurity is that I get to experience so many different projects and so many different products and technologies. But I've done things ranging from insulin pumps, test assay systems that you can test in the field for diseases. I've worked on surgical robots, a number of different types of surgical robots, also heart pumps, large volume pumps, all sorts of different fun, critical devices.
Mostly class 2, class 3 devices.
Class 3, but also down to class 1.
Yeah, so
a lot of class 3s.
A lot of different diversity on products. I would imagine local, offshore, you name it, kind of small startup companies, large organizations, as you mentioned. So kind of all different dynamics. Because of that, I think your point of view is going to be all over the map and can relate to really anybody who's listening.
At different stages of the project, of different projects too, we service clients that have products out live in the field that are being used by lots of patients, or new startups that are just trying to come to market for the first time, and they need to put together a QMS and figure out what their testing best practices are even going to be. So everywhere in between, places that get into trouble with the FDA, places that are trying to prepare not to let that happen. So I'm excited to hear about the questions that we're going to go over today.
Yeah, exactly. So, one thing that we like to have as part of our show here is this is a happy hour, right? So let's get into the most important part of today, and that's opening a drink here. This is not encouraging alcohol by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have a happy hour here at Medicurity. It's been part of our culture, and so whether it's alcohol or it's a seltzer or soda or water or whatever, it's a great way for us to open up conversation and just talk about the projects that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. We have a great team here at Medicurity with a variety of different insights, technically speaking, but just backgrounds and walks of life. And so the happy hour is a great way to talk through some of those things. So that's the theme of the podcast. What'd you bring to the table here? We got...
First time I've had one of these since the pandemic. The name recognition went to the tubes.
So we got a Corona Extra for Jesse. I'm still practicing dry January and March, but that's kind of a personal choice. I'm just enjoying the soberness, and as such, I'm going to keep going here. And I've got Athletic Brewing. So for my non-alcoholic friends out there, this is a 0% IPA. Actually, I think it's a golden ale, but yeah, they'll fit the theme of the podcast.
And I'm excited to talk in an informal setting like this because we're going to go over a lot of the pain points that we help our clients get through.
Yeah.
And so it's great to get out in front of some of these problems and talk about them before they become problems. So it's a much better setting to discuss things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, anyone who turned into the first episode here, you probably saw that it was our first go. So hopefully you've seen a little bit of improvement on audio, or you've heard a little bit of improvement on the audio. We've also done some updates on some of our editing. So instead of it being super cut and edited, I think it's just going to be more of a flowing dialogue. And hopefully that makes it a little bit more enjoyable for you guys to listen to. But here, cheers, Jesse. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean.
Super excited to have you here again. So let's jump in. I feel good. I love a good beer. I'm going to celebrate a long day here. All right. So One thing that we can kind of start this out is maybe framing the conversation, right? And so when we're talking just about what this topic could be about, there's a lot, right? And I think from a quality engineering standpoint, especially in economic times, you tend to see the cuts hit there first, right? And because of that, it occurs a lot of risk and unnecessary risk. But we get it, by the way. Like businesses are forced to have to, protect their revenue and to get good run rates and to extend. Well, things are uncertain from a financial standpoint, but from a day to day and the team in the trenches dealing with the realities of the program schedule, you start to kind of see things slip, which can end up costing more for clients, which happens through delays. There's regulatory setbacks. Worst of all, maybe the product recalls that happen here. The tech debt is something that we're seeing accumulate.
That's something I want to talk about too. Technical debt we see accruing a lot in economic downtimes for companies because they could be doing everything right and they could be prioritizing things appropriately, but there's just not the resources there to handle all the technical debt. And that's where we can come in and help companies catch back up.
Yeah. And so, by the way, there's a lot of ways that you can cut this, right? Like from a quality engineering perspective, a lot of our clients have some presence of quality engineering. Right now, admittedly, it's a reduced staff, so they're wearing a lot of different hats here and owning a lot of the responsibilities. But a lot of people, when I talk to quality, they think it's as simple as just writing test cases and executing against that. But quality is so much more, right? Especially in the frame of medical device software development, and I think that's really what we're going to get into. So. We're going to kind of use that as the frame of mind here. But from your perspective, what
I like to say is software quality it's like the first and the last line of defense.
Yeah.
And if you're not implementing it in the very beginning stages of your software development lifecycle, then you're going to run into exponentially larger problems later on down the line.
Good point. And so this is kind of like when you're looking at quality engineering, where should you focus your time for the biggest ROI, and understanding that value proposition of quality engineering in your program. So yeah, let's just jump into this. So from a medical device companies that are commonly looking at us in Medicuity, what are some of the things that they're coming to us to support with in 2025?
Okay. This is what we see coming in the industry this year. And what Medicuity specializes in a lot of different things. We can come in and software architect or system architect and put together whole strategies for an entire system. We have a huge team of great developers that can integrate into any development team or even create products in-house that for companies. But today we're going to focus on our software quality engineering department. And what we see in 2025 coming up a lot is clients are trying to catch back up from some economic down years, and they're trying to assess where they are and figure out a plan going forward and how to attack the highest priority items.
Yeah, what do you think that is? Like, so from my standpoint, when I'm on the sales side, right, and account management, what were the trigger points? I know economically that's what we frame it as, but the pandemic was I think a big catalyst to that, right? And what happened there? There was a huge investment in resources. There was this huge staffing spree, and there was a massive amount of hiring at all these companies. And then what ended up happening was kind of bloatedness, and then the pandemic held on a little bit longer than people were expecting, and then now layoffs. But when the hiring was happening, there was also this attrition that was going on because companies were poaching from each other, and so all this lost knowledge was
That's right
too, right? Is that what's leading to a lot of the tech debt too?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, lack of definition of standards, lack of documentation best practices, things that are necessarily required to innovate. You can still innovate with leaving these things kind of to the side, but eventually you're going to run into a lot of pain points, especially with high turnover. Then there's no standards in place. When you lose that knowledge, you really lose your standing because there's no standards in place to bring up to speed.
And no documentation for somebody to read up or where somebody left off. That processes may not be solid or clearly understood or followed.
If development best practices aren't being or test best practices aren't being followed, then the new people that are coming in are not going to have any idea what this code does, any idea how to use this test framework, any idea how to document requirements properly based on the company standards. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to talk about it.
and that kind of leads to what you were talking about first. Is when we're brought in, a lot of it is just that assessment. Like, where are we at? What does it look like from an outside perspective?
We're looking at specializing in DevOps assessments. A lot of clients looking for requirements management assessments, overall V&V readiness assessments, tool validations included within that. A lot of clients get in trouble by not prioritizing tool validations in the SDLC. And not just that, but whether you're doing your tool validations, but does your company have a standard SOP for the tool validation process in the first place? Do you have anyone who has a lot of experience with different companies with tool validation SOPs, for example, to be able to implement something like that? So those are things that we uniquely have the experience, the wide amount of experience with different projects and different standards that we're able to help very efficiently and quickly.
Yeah, I know tool validation isn't the sexy topic of quality, but it's overlooked, and it often catches people really in timely points of the program that's to give a false sense of how close we are to being complete, and then the program end up being a lot longer because they're not accounting for that.
That's right.
So it's undiscovered tech debt, really, at that point.
Yep. And you might not even know that it's there.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So another example that is exciting that clients are really happy about is what we come for an assessment. That part of that is an action plan on how clients can address the highest priority findings in the assessment. For example, we can come in, identify that you can benefit from a test automation framework, and then from that, bring in principal test automation engineers to set that framework up, help you interview, hire, and train automation engineers to take over that automation framework and running it and creating test cases, and then step back and you have a whole working automation suite and a framework and a standards in place.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic. So one thing that our clients are often, I think, surprised to hear is that our best interest is making sure that they have a life without Medicuity, right? They're hiring us as experts to get things either back on track or to kick things off, right? But at the end of the day, our clients own their software, they own their product. And so exactly what you just said is we can help you build out a team, right? We can help you build out the infrastructure and the frameworks and get things going and make it so you have the ability to live without us, right?
Yeah, we focus on completing a project for a client, and then hopefully that relationship leads to further projects that the client has that they want to now trust us and they can turn to us for.
That's right. Now moving on here to how can software quality maybe drive any process improvements for our medtech customers?
So anyone in this space knows that the regulated environment that we're in is ever changing. The FDA is constantly changing the things that they're focusing on, things that they're emphasizing, and it's very hard to stay up to date with that while you're trying to innovate a competitive new product or keep enhancing and updating an existing product. And we do that so that companies don't have to. We stay up to date. We attend FDA presentations. We stay up to date with changing standards. And we can come in. We've seen the types of process improvements that do and don't work. We've seen the way that pushback does and doesn't impact new process improvement with medical device development teams. And what we can do is put in place standards that help consistent work happen all the time, no matter who the employee is that is coming in to do whatever the role may be. Consistent output. So no matter who's working on your project, your documentation is going to be output to the correct standard that it needs to be. And we can improve project forecasting and budgeting accuracy by using our industry knowledge and standards to see where we constantly see the same places where project budgets run into problems or forecasts are constantly don't give enough time for the defects fixing cycle at the end of a test to run. So we think this is how long the tests are going to take. That's maybe we do like a conservative guess towards that, but unless you have a lot of experience with medical device releases, you might not understand how time consuming the defect identification, resolution, but also documentation processes. So it's little things like that that we can impact to give you a more accurate, quicker time to market and a more accurate project plan.
I mean, I think there's so much in there that is completely valid, right? And I think being on the other side of consultants and having all these projects every year that we're supporting, like you said, the experience of going through this multiple different times a year, like our clients go through it once with their product, right? But we're going through it several times on several clients, several different products, all the different type of complexities that go in with it, the scrutiny that they have over their products. But at the end of the day, there's common themes that we've seen, right? There's uniqueness between product and company, but I think allocation and forecasting is really important. Quality engineering is always, the end of the road, and they're always getting the short stick of schedule and expected to make up for a lot of things. And as much as we see that happen, the reality is it never actually goes the way that they hope it does. Quality can't make up for all of the delays that have happened down the stream, right? Or upstream, whatever way you want to look at it.
Here's a great example that exemplifies that. So, you might have a device that requires a certain amount of test boards to be given to testers so that they can test the product, and maybe the person planning that whole process of ordering that hardware and budgeting for the right amount of test boards doesn't quite understand how many are needed. So we run into a problem where you've got 5 testers on a project. We've only got 2 test boards. We're waiting on electrical engineering support because not enough of that support was hired. We're having trouble getting compliance to IEC 60601 for electrical standards. And we run into a point where you're paying people to just sit there on a project. The timeline's getting longer for no reason other than it just wasn't planned. Someone didn't have the foresight to think we're not ordering enough test boards because you just haven't seen a project where that's been a problem before. So.
Yeah, and I think that is, we talk about this probably many times throughout this podcast today, but in the sense of where our value comes is, again, quality is not an isolated function. You are so dependent of other groups and cross-functionally working, and the EE being an example of that, and to communicate these challenges, dependencies, and risks is something that we have an obligation as a consultant to support our clients with. Giving them foresight is like, hey, just so it's on your radar, I know it's not accounted for right now, but this is something we should be aware of, right? And that's invaluable in my opinion.
Yep. I mean, if the budget and the plan is being worked out without input of people who have specialized in a regulated software development lifecycle, then we're bound to run into conflicts with the projects.
Which, by the way, is very common, right? Because you can't hire everybody with 30 years of experience in medtech, right? And so every client that we
is always changing. Right. So you might have someone who's specialized in how it was working 10 or 8 years ago, but it's hard to keep up.
It is. You mentioned standards and in those changing. One of the biggest ones that I think a lot of our clients are feeling the changes rapidly happening is cybersecurity, right? And so that's just one example, but it can happen at any point throughout your development life cycle, and that is risk or impact to schedule that was unaccounted for at nobody's fault. But being ahead of what's coming, dialed into the industry, being part of the seminars and just hearing what's coming, having some readiness for that is important, and then being able to react to that, I think, is a lot easier.
But another thing comes to mind, CBSS 3.0. It's going to update in 2026, and that's the scoring system we use for common vulnerability risk analysis prioritization scoring, and that's one way that you can be compliant with 14971. And are clients using a standard scoring system for risks in the first place? Are they preparing for the update to the system? So those are the types of things that we have to keep on top of as our role as clients, as consultants. So those are things we're happy to help clients.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's so many examples of that, but that's one that kind of feels very, very common right now. Cybersecurity risk management is so front of mind right now.
AI and ML. Can you leverage those to improve time to market or to improve the amount of time you have to spend on your releases? I know something that we are looking into is creating AI like library repository of all our standards and practices, all our best test case writing techniques, examples of those, so that we can maybe perhaps leverage those to help auto-generate things in the future, or at least be able to reference only our company specific standards and practices, or set that up for clients to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question here because I think this is a really important one. And they're all important questions, but I like this one in the sense that you start to look at quality from less of a cost center as more as a how does software quality engineering contribute to lowering the development costs of the program?
So it can contribute greatly to raising and lowering the costs, as we who've been through a lot of projects know. But the one thing that Metacurity believes in is a culture of test-driven development, where testing is an essential part of the planning and development process during the entire SDLC. So when you have a new enhancement, let's say for an existing product, test input is key for the very early stages of that, so that we can uncover defects in high priority areas right away, which will exponentially lower the amount of money it costs to fix them in time, so that we can also plan for equipment that's going to be needed, plan for tool validations that are going to be needed. We want to use a test-driven development mind state and instill it in the culture of the development team, so that we are not developing new requirements that are not testable. We're not putting new functionality into the system that is not testable. I know that for one client, tedious hours of testing could have been saved if they had engineered a place for a automation framework to be included in the product. And that would have been, from the beginning of the project, if that was planned, it would have been easy to implement as just part of the device that could only be accessed through like a test user or something like that. And because of that, so much manual testing was needed to prove out complex algorithms that could have been easily being tested constantly through automation, but there was just no way to get a framework onto the way that the device was already way down the line of being manufactured and built.
And at that point, it's the wrong time to think of test automation, right? Yeah, totally. But it's like when companies come to us and say, I'm interested in test automation, but it's so expensive. They look at it from the upfront costs. And what you're saying is, if you don't, here's what it happens, because you end up paying more in the back end when you're manually and rigorously testing these things that take a lot of time, right? So
I 100% agree that it is a huge upfront cost that is a waste when it's not done intentionally and thoughtfully.
Yeah.
You need to have enough experience with software development projects where you know the areas that are going to give you ROI for implementing something like test automation in, and you know the areas that it's going to be a waste of time to do that type of thing in. And that's what we can do, is put together automation strategy, for example, that lets you know, is it feasible or not? How much time will it take? How much investment is it going to take? When will you start returning on the investment past the point of the cost? All the things like that.
Yeah, and I did love the strategy aspect of it, because it doesn't have to mean automation for everything, and it doesn't mean blindly put automation where it doesn't make sense. But in the critical path areas and the places that you mentioned you need ROI, that is exactly it, right? But also, test automation isn't necessarily something that is overly complex. Like, these could be simple Python scripts, right? These aren't necessarily the most I mean, some of them are, but not all of them are that complicated, right?
One of the biggest things that I've seen create even large conflicts between different divisions is when requirements are not defined and agreed upon and the proper time during the SDLC. When they're either too vague, or a lot of companies have a general idea in a brain trust of how this system is supposed to work, and they have pretty well defined what the user needs are. But then there's a lot of disconnect on what the actual requirements are, how they should be structured, how many levels do there need to be, who is responsible for what, and that can cause huge derailments in the project. Vagueness in software development, especially in regulated software development, is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to hone in on that on the last episode that I did with Tom, where we talked about, requirements definition and the importance of that and what happens at the hardware software integration stage. But you're right, and I think almost every single one of our clients has issues with being efficient or even really detailed enough at the requirements level, because it's often at the system level or just really high level, but not at the software level. And that's a very big difference.
Yeah, but it's not been iterated down to the software level because that's not necessarily required to proceed with the innovation of the product.
So how do we help?
So one,
and if I'm jumping the gun, by the way.
Oh no, yeah. This is one of my most passionate topics. So what needs to happen is you need to implement test-driven development from the beginning. So that is going to drive requirements management happening during the correct phases of the SDLC. And when new functionalities is introduced, the developers, the product owners, and the testers all need to agree on specifically how we're going to tell the FDA this is supposed to work, so that when we prove that it works that way, the FDA can easily see this is how it's supposed to work. Yes, they proved it appropriately. Okay, they can start making money on their device. What it allows you to do is, when you're thinking of in a test-driven development mindset, you're fixing defects at the point of introduction at a much higher rate than you would be in a traditional setting, where defect cost is just gaining exponentially at each phase of the SDLC. You go down the line without
the snowball effect.
Exactly. And I've seen much better accurate project forecasts when test-driven development happens right away, because we're not taking on unknowns. We're figuring out everything that needs to happen in order to implement this change or this new functionality.
And the cost of rework refactoring is greatly reduced at that point too.
Correct. That's a key point. It helps you avoid rework, avoid retesting, avoid redeveloping something to add a component that you needed to test that you now didn't realize until it was too late. Like talking to you about the example that we heard before, if you're going to need X number of test boards and X number of testers to complete this within, let's say the management has said it's going to be a 6-month cycle of testing. When you have testing involved in the decision-making of the development process, you're going to know if you have negative impacts to the project plan and schedule right away.
Yeah. Project managers love that, by the way. They can pick up on that and then give their people a heads up. It's good to give that visibility and transparency. But
so what we do is in Medicuity that is unique is we bring not just testing expertise, but system and whole project level expertise. I like to say that you're getting a senior level SQE as the minimum is what you're going to get from Medicuities. Someone who is seasoned, is able to implement process improvements, able to take members on the team under their wing, able to run project management practices, but also able to help not only uncover testability, vagueness, and styling in requirements, but also have a risk-based approach to that, where we're prioritizing requirements based on risk, scrutinizing higher risky ones earlier, finding defects in higher risk components of the software much earlier than before, avoiding wasting time lower risk components of the software. How many times have we seen thorough testing on extremely low risk or areas of a product where where it comes into pays off to keep up to date with FDA communications. I've seen a few FDA presentations lately saying that the FDA does not want to slow innovation. The FDA wants to innovate quickly. They want our country to be innovating as quickly as possible in a safe environment. And so they are stressing, do not over test, do not over document, do not capture too much evidence on areas that are low risk.
Yeah.
Put that effort into high risk areas, shift it away from low risk areas. For example, a low risk tool validation might not even need any testing. We might be able to leverage existing vendor documentation and say that based on our risk analysis, that it satisfies this. Or we might be making some software as a medical device that's extremely high risk. And those are extremes are hard, but it's the nuanced ones. It's so many companies I've seen taking a medium low level tool validation, for example, and treating it with as much scrutiny as their highest level ones. And it just makes the whole process unnecessarily so long.
And that, in all fairness, it's probably because they don't know better, right? And it's not we're not pointing fingers at anybody, but it's to that experience that you're mentioning. Like, what you want to do is make all of your documentation that you're submitting to the FDA as readable as possible, and focusing them on where your critical aspects are, and providing all the data for them to say, all right, these guys got to cover. And they've thought about this.
Not providing data that is not required.
Yeah.
That can cause way more problems than anything else. Only provide what is required to the FDA. They don't want to see more than that.
Yeah.
They want to see what is required. We don't want to invite areas of scrutiny where they don't need to be.
Yeah.
And that's where we love helping clients. We love helping them fine tune their SDLC to get it humming and working perfectly in the ever-changing regulated environment. And that's just our passion.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And sometimes I wish my clients could be part of this conversation, and maybe now they are. But to understand really what quality engineering means for MediCuity and how it can help our customers, it's so much more than just test execution that you've just highlighted. There's so many value propositions in there that sometimes I'm like, are you asking us the right questions, right? Because we're often only shared so much information at a qualified sales call, so we might not know this until we get into the program. Oftentimes, we actually don't know the reality of the situation. So, would I invite any of our audience listening in here that's maybe thinking, do I have some inefficiencies in my quality or opportunities for improvement? Am I not happy with the way things are going? These are some questions to ask internally, and then come to us and say, have you had any experience? Can you help us out with this? And then we can go into a lot of detail, as Jesse has mentioned here. So
how about little things too that can bubble up into bigger problems that maybe just no one has the time or it's no one's responsibility to be scrutinizing these things. Like, are clients leveraging their ALM tool to get the most that they can out of it? Are they using custom fields in their requirements? Are they using custom queries? Are they leveraging suspect links? Do they have their tracing set up properly so that when a change happens to a risky requirement, it's triggering all the proper suspect links? Is that stuff set up for the get-go? Because that's going to facilitate bug fixing. It's going to facilitate the documentation, the risk analysis, the mitigations that are put into place. It's going to eliminate ambiguity around how the system is supposed to work.
Yeah.
There's so many different things you can do with requirements to speed up. For example, on something that is low risk, you can get into the trouble of constraining the design with the requirements being too detailed. You could be talking about the layout of a login page and giving specific details with the size of the login box, the what type of keyboard maybe is used, different things like that, that on a high risk screen might be make a lot of sense, but on a low risk one, you're making it too hard to design for the developers. Make it open ended, let them design it, and if you need to, even edit the requirements after that to bring everything in line if that detail was required. But it's eliminating the little tiny back and forth between each little step of the process, developers to testers to offshore team back to over to onshore team. Well, when we had a disconnect about this like color and that color, knowing when to prioritize versus not when to prioritize is how you really efficiently maximize time to market, time to release, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of going through some of the questions that we had here, and I know that we touched on that in a little bit here. Yeah, there is just so much that I'm trying not to interrupt you because they're saying so many good things here, and each one of these topics we could go down a rabbit hole, right?
Oh yeah.
And hopefully that this is insight that you guys maybe are feeling the same burden and pain. But I'm curious, by the way, if you're listening, put in some comments like, what are you guys seeing? Would you like us to address any of our thoughts on the matter? So please do so. These are just things that Jesse and your team kind of came to this conversation and what you want to bring forward. So yeah, there's a lot we could cover here. In terms of that's a question that we were going to ask about, like commonly overlooked areas of software quality that can mound up and be bigger issues. Turn mountain into a molehill or molehill into a mountain rather. What other areas? Is there anything else in that you want to cover, or is that cover kind of most of that topic right now? I just want to make sure I'm not losing track of my
No, yeah, I'm going anywhere that I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm not serious. I'm doing my best not to lose track of it. But
Another thing that along those lines is you might have a situation where something was rushed, there was a deadline, maybe some process or standard was written in a way that was not specific or not defined, detailed enough, corners were cut, and now you've got areas of in your department or areas of the whole regulatory process that are not well defined.
yeah,
And maybe the people that made the changes to the current system are not even at the company anymore.
Right.
Nobody remembers why they were set up like this. A tool validation QMS system, things like that. We can come in and rewrite your SOPs for something like tool validation. We can use one thing that MetaQuity excels at is consulting soft skills. We can interview the people on the team, everyone involved from the higher ups. We can look at the old standards. We can do the research. We know what the FDA is looking for, and we can craft company-specific SOPs that for you to take and then use going forward. So the next time a tool validation comes up, there's no ambiguity on what the scrutiny needs to be, how the documentation needs to look. It just helps you avoid inconsistent output and having to refigure out things over and over again.
Yeah, true. And again, being on the other side of the consultant, having this be consistent theme across a lot of clients, we've got to the point where now we have templates that we've created to help expedite that too, right? Whether they're SOP templates or just to-do validation templates that help with t-shirt sizing and estimates based on tools that we've worked with similarly in the past. So these are other things to consider in terms of how do you accelerate, how do you lower costs, how do you bring in expertise to minimize that cost and schedule burden on a program. Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think these are, in terms of overlooked things, like I don't think it's intentional, by the way. I think maybe even going back to the beginning part of the conversation, it's overlooked because teams have been reduced so greatly.
I think that's just that you have to do to survive sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to accrue some technical debt in certain areas.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out a way to deal with them.
Yep.
To deal with it. And I think that in a regulated environment like med tech, having high expertise individuals that have process improvement in mind and are trying to drive change for clients, I think those are the most valuable people to bring in when there's any deficiency on the team or and there's a ramp up for a release, or if we want to try to avoid negative findings from the FDA.
Yeah. So as a client, who do you have on your team that fill that description, right? And if the question is, if you don't have those people, or maybe they're over allocated on other priorities, that's a good time to reach out, right? Because they are critical and they do lead to big issues down the road. So the sooner you address it, the better. And we can certainly go through case studies of where that has yielded positive results when you do address it. But
The unique strength that we have is just the a variety of different projects we're involved in, and a number of different clients at different stages of their health and size allows us to just speak in an informed way and give informed action plans to problems, anticipate problems before they happen, so you can put plans in place.
so it's more than educated guessing, right?
That's right. Yeah, you've seen problems before, and we know what the early signs are, and we know what plans work.
Yeah. I always feel bad because I feel like clients come to us not wanting to admit their challenges, but the reality is every single one of our clients have challenges. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in business, right? And so it is normal, it is common, and it is something that it's just you need somebody else keeping an eye on and making sure that they've got all their ducks in orders and looking in places that maybe they're just not even thinking about, right? And so, yeah, there's so many ways that we could help out. But we talked about technical debt a little bit earlier on here, and we've touched on several points throughout the program. We talked about doing assessments and whatnot. Maybe that's part of the conversation here is in terms of how do you resolve that tech debt that is accrued and where you start. And then once you realize what you've got, how do you chip away at it?
So prioritization through risk management, a risk-based approach to everything. You want to prioritize the things that are going to get you the most return on your investment, that are the highest risk, that you can accomplish. But I think that a lot of people don't know where to start.
Yeah.
When it comes to something like that, because you kind of we have a great standard regulated process that we use that includes the CVSS scoring functionality to assess risks and analyze the types of areas in a project that we have extremely experienced software architects, system architects that can come from a top-down approach. And we've gone into SQE departments for clients and done complete assessments of the entire functionality of the SQE department, making action plans for every single area that could improve. And then we're helping the client prioritize and improve the areas that they're looking to improve. They've expanded the team a little bit to help make that happen. And we've also been helping with that process as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm kind of going through. We had prepared just some thoughts, but we've kind of touched a lot of these next questions here. Just kind of looking through in terms of what we haven't already spoken about.
And what we can do is we can make the project proceed without accruing additional technical debt.
Right.
Maybe
How do you do that in parallel, right? Like you don't stop. You have to keep moving. So how do
That's
you
right.
do it?
Well, you have to increase efficiency.
Yeah.
We're always thinking about lowering cost as well. A huge cost savings we helped for a client where they had an input console that was extremely expensive to manufacture and to make tests. They didn't have like an whole manufacturing process put together. This is just an initial stages of a new product. And it's very expensive to get these input consoles, and you need them to be able to do anything on the system. Mm-hmm. And we created a validated software tool that simulated the console that would allow us to do any other testing that needed to happen. We'd still have a physical console to test console-specific requirements, but we could prioritize the things that could be done on the equipment that we did or didn't have, and we were able to speed up the testing process exponentially, save a ton of money on test equipment. And those are the types of things that we developed the whole software tool itself. So that was something that we did completely for the client, passed it back off to them. Now they have this validated tool where they can know how to maintain it and update it.
I mean, I can't think of a program with any of our clients where hardware limitations hasn't been a major factor, right? And it's not a surprise for customers. They know they're going to have a short amount of devices that they have to share, and it's always being kind of reworked. And so the concept of emulators and emulators are always relevant for us, especially we're supporting a lot of our customers globally too. So being physically present with a lot of devices is not always an option for us. So yeah, we're always pushing the concept of do you have an emulator? Do you have a simulator? What is it covering? What can it help you out with gaining efficiencies early and often? And then again, anything that we're developing for our clients, they own. So your last point is handing that back to them to own and maintain going forward. So as we wrap up here, you've heard a lot from Jesse, just in all aspects of quality engineering, and there's some common themes, hopefully, that just in the conversation that we've had, popping up in different areas. But going back to everything that we talked about, what makes quality engineering at Medicure special? And I know you are biased, be part of that team. But I want it to come across as how we can drive value to our customers and making sure they understand, our uniqueness as a team, what we strive to build out here internally. And what's your take on that?
So we live and breathe the regulated environment of medical devices all the time. So we're up to date on the trends, how things are changing. We have a unique perspective where we see into so many different projects. We've seen into so many different projects that have needed help that we've been able to help them. Successful projects that we've run. We've seen the signs of when requirements management is going wrong. We've seen the signs of when test is not given enough time in the project plan. We've seen a lot. So we're able to use that knowledge to benefit any different problem that might come up during a company's life cycle in terms of bringing their product on.
We certainly have seen a lot. We have some battle wounds to share. So, but in good ways, right? So we've been through the thick of it, and we can now hopefully prevent people from following that safe path. But if you're in that position, we can help get you out of it.
And so we're going to help you get the most out of your SQE budget, because when we come in, we're not only interested in the work that is on the SOW. We're interested in making a real impact and for the client in driving process improvement, looking for areas that we've seen before. In the last 5 years, I've been with 10 clients, 10 different projects. I know which things work and don't work. I'm looking for where can I make process improvement areas for this client to help them in the future past when I even leave.
Yeah, that's an alignment to our mission, vision, value as a company, right? Who we are, what we stand for. It's more than just a legal document of what we're responsible for doing. We're out to help our clients be successful, because at the end of the day, our client's success is our success. If they fail, we fail, right? And being a consultant, we have a huge obligation to make sure that you are doing as best as you can. No, I 100% agree. I think we talked a little bit about just being dynamic in your background educationally, being able to maybe work cross-functionally on different engineering disciplines. Any thoughts about that?
So it comes across with that we are able to fill many different roles. So we can identify holes, fill different roles. If you need our SQEs to help out with system engineering, if you need them to help out with, or manual testers to help out with automation, if you need help with your risk management procedures, if you need help writing new QMS SOPs, we're able to fill all those roles because of the wide range of experience that we have and the senior level individuals that we staff. And that is how we can identify a process improvement area that needs to happen, make a plan, and then actually make that change.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll wrap it up here, because I think that this was a great discussion. Jesse, thank you so much for joining. Hopefully you guys all found Jesse's point of view is insightful and maybe even relatable to everything that you have gone through. I mentioned it earlier, but if you heard anything today that is exciting or you want to learn more about, you can reach out to medicuity.com. There's a contact us section that you can reach out to. Feel free to connect with either one of us on LinkedIn. We're open for a conversation, even if it's just exploratory. So Medicuity is here to help, but also just getting connected with our community is also interesting for us as well. So again, we'll wrap it up here. I'll do one final cheers.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for being a guest on our show. I know this is, by the way, most of our company is engineers. I'm one of the few that is not an engineer. So podcasting is not something that is like in our DNA. I hope that we're not pretending to be podcast experts, but I hope this is also fun and enjoyable for you and the audience as well. So, yeah, any final words to our viewers?
Thanks to everyone for watching. We might not be podcast experts, but we are medical device engineering experts. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's fun to talk about this stuff. Thanks.
Thanks again for tuning into Health Tech Happy Hour Code Pour, where software meets medtech and robotics. We enjoyed this conversation. We'll see you at the next episode. Take care.